Good evening and welcome to the Auburn Large School District Forum that is annually held here at Cayuga Community College and sponsored by the college as well as the Citizen. On May 15th, voters across the state of New York will be able to go to the polls not only to vote on school budgets but also for their members of their boards of education. In the case of the city of Auburn, or the Auburn Large School District, there's a $76.4 million proposition before the voters. That's with a spending increase above last year of about 1.5%. If you have a basic star exemption, that comes out to about $19 a year or $1.58 per month. So tonight we have with us the candidates for the Auburn School Board. There are 3 slots open, and there are 5 candidates this year, and we're delighted to have all 5 with us. They will be before voters on May 15th, and as we have done with school board, with the city council, county legislature, and other offices, we try to bring this annually as our end of the season event for the telecom department. We have with us all 5 candidates. They are Ian Phillips, who is a newcomer, Kathleen Rhodes, who is an incumbent, Andy Robley, who is rerunning for the board. He served a portion of a term. We have Michael McColl, who is the board president, who is running for re-election, and Sam Giangreco, who is also running for re-election. Welcome all 5 of you. You're going to be questioned over the next hour and a half by Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer can ask questions of you individually or as a group, and we'll go through and make sure we give each of you equal and fair time. We have in the studio with us Cheyenne, who is one of our students, who will be timing you. You have 2 minutes for your opening statements and 2 minutes for your closings, as well as for all of your questions and answers. And if you want to ask a follow up on a question, you can do so, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But we would like to start with Mr. Phillips. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Mr. Phillips, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. My name is Ian Phillips, and I'm running for school board. I'm a proud Auburn graduate. I'm running because Auburn teachers transformed my life. I believe that we're at a critical moment in the history of our school district and probably school districts across our state. We're at a time when our schools are being starved of funding. We are going to lose 28 positions in this year's budget. We lost 10 positions last year. This at a time when we are faced with unique challenges for our workforce. And at the same time, we have a tremendous focus on testing and state testing. And the winnowing of our curriculum that is forced by that testing troubles me greatly. I've spent my professional life advocating for kids in schools. I was a parent advocate in Philadelphia for a number of years. And that really opened my eyes to the challenges and the benefits that I had as a student growing up here in Auburn. I then became a middle school teacher in Detroit and saw the unique challenges that the children in that city faced. And currently, I work with the New York State United Teachers, professionally advocating against those same tests and for more funding for our schools in Albany and all across the state. I believe I can bring that expertise to bear on the issues facing this district and my hometown, and I look forward to doing so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll now hear from Kathleen Rhodes, who I believe is the Vice President of the Board of Education. Ms. Rhodes.
Thank you. My name is Kathleen Rhodes. I have been on the board for 2 terms. I've been Vice President. My goal is to strengthen the community bonds with the school in light of what's happened in Parkland and in recent months. Communication and safety are paramount, in my opinion. I think that's something that we should focus on as a district and move forward with.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mr. Robley.
Thanks, Guy. My name is Andrew Robley. My wife, Devin, and I own a small home on Auburn's west side, and my 2 boys, Alex and Arthur, go to Genesee Elementary School. I previously served on the board from 2013 to 2015, when I left to pursue a master's degree at Cornell University. While I was there, I researched and wrote what amounts to a small book on the history of New York and Auburn's public education system. As a parent of 2 wonderful kids, I have a personal stake in this board seat. I want to make sure that the resources are there as they move through their school career. With kids in the district, I don't want to get complacent. They need me, and they need the board in the district to fight even harder for them. When it comes to curriculum and state aid, if we don't like what Albany's telling us, we need to change the conversation. As a homeowner, I believe that the school district must take a greater role in the economic development of Auburn. There are ways that the district can start to generate revenue outside of the tax levy, rather than waiting on the whims of the state. Before we begin this debate, I'd like to say that I've served with all three of these incumbents, and I consider them honestly to be my friends and good people. And I also agree with the board president's statement that, quote, "new blood and fresh ideas are the best thing for the board," end quote. Reading that in the paper last July is what inspired me to run again. It's time for the long-serving board members to graciously move aside with our thanks and let new energy and fresh ideas reinvigorate the board. I'm ready to take my seat again and complete my commitment to my children and all of Auburn's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robley. We'll hear from Michael McColl, who is the board chair.
Good evening. My name is Michael McColl, and tonight I'm once again seeking your support so that I can continue to serve this community on the Board of Education. I've proudly served on this board for the past 6 years, 5 of those as either the president or vice president. As my time is short, I'd like to highlight just some of the achievements of the past 6 years under my leadership. From classroom improvements to technology upgrades to investments in our auditoriums and athletic playing fields, this district has modernized, upgraded, repaired, and replaced the facilities used by our students in the community. School security and safety is a concern to us all. Auburn has been addressing these issues for years. A new video surveillance system throughout the district and recently installed controlled points of entry at all of our buildings will help us to better protect the students and staff. A continued relationship with the Auburn Police Department supporting the SRO program has led to a safety and security approach that many districts are currently trying to copy. Challenging new educational programming for our students have been implemented. A new delivery model for special education services, the P-TECH program for students interested in careers in manufacturing, engineering and biomedical science classes in the junior and senior high school are but a few. All this hard work, coupled with countless hours of instruction and guidance from our teachers, administrators, and parents, has led to the highest graduation rate in years and a steep reduction in our district dropout rate. When our students are exposed to interesting instruction, new technology, and modern facilities, they remain engaged in their education. None of this happens by accident. It happens because hardworking, dedicated teachers, administrators, and board members work with students and families to make Auburn one of the finest districts in New York State. I'm extremely proud of the work I've done while serving on this board. I'm excited about the progress we have made and the goals that we have set. I'm asking for your support so that I can use the experience and knowledge I've developed over the past 6 years to continue to move this district and community in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McColl. We'll now hear from Samuel Giangreco, who has served on the board a number of years. Mr. Giangreco.
Thank you. My name is Sam Giangreco. I have asking for your vote for a 4th term on the Board of Education. I'm very proud of what this board has accomplished so far. We're a working board. We get things done, and we are advocating especially for the most important thing, which is foundation aid, because without that foundation aid, we cannot produce the results in the other areas. I'm also on the Facilities Committee. I'm the chairman, and I'm very, very concerned about safety in our buildings. We all know what's happened around us. We all know what's going on. It's getting too close to home, and I'm very, very troubled by that. We have some ideas in mind and also in progress to safen our buildings in the coming months. On a personal note, I'm very concerned about the opiate addiction and problems we have in Auburn. I recently lost a granddaughter in January, and I never thought that would happen to me. And all I can say is I'm very concerned with how we address that in our schools. I think the SROs are vital because they receive information from our children and they interpret it and they become friends with them, and they can help in this fight against the opiate addiction as well as potential violence in our schools. That is paramount, especially with the education of our children at 84%. But you cannot learn unless you have a safe, working, and learning environment. So I'm all for that. I'm asking for your support once again. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sam Giangreco. We will now hear from Jeremy Boyer, who is the executive editor of The Citizen. He can read his columns on Thursday in The Citizen, and we're delighted to have him back. I think this is, what, your 12th year doing this, so...
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you for doing this. So.
It's been a while, just about as long as Sam has been on the board.
So he can ask questions of any of you or all of you. We'll rotate if it's for everyone. If you would like to respond once if you have spoken and somebody says something you want to respond to, if you just look over here, we'll give you an extra minute, and we'll offer that opportunity for everyone for one round, for at least one question per round. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, well, thanks for all of you for coming to today's program and also for stepping up to run. It's nice. It's been a few years since we've actually had a contested race. I'd like to see that. In our business, it's obviously good, but also it's just good to have a conversation and a discussion about education. So appreciate you all running. I'm going to start with the budget. I'm sure we'll talk about this over a few rounds of questions, but on the big picture side of the budget, the board did have about a $2.3 million deficit to close this year, and they chose to, a big way to close that was to eliminate some positions, 14 through retirements, 13 teacher aides and 1 teacher is my understanding from reading the newsletter. And so my first question to all of you, but more especially the challengers, is was this the right approach to closing the budget gap? And if not, what would you have done differently?
This is for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, since Mr. Phillips did the opening statement, we'll start with Ms. Rhodes and make our way around the bend.
One of the things that we look at, or that I looked at specifically, is what's going to affect children. Cutting teachers does affect children. I realize that. But I also don't want to cut programs. Programs that we have that for our students that they need is not where we need to be. So my goal was to keep our programming in place. We also had cut the teachers that have been, I'm not even going to say cut, because we did it through attrition. So the teachers that were retiring, those people we didn't replace those positions. So we really, in effect, this year, we didn't lose a teacher. However, we kept our positions pretty much intact. So that was a blessing in this right there. But it's very difficult when you're facing a budget cut and you're facing, where do we go? We can cut equipment, yes. We can cut, personnel is really our high cost, and that's where we have to look at.
Thank you. Mr. Robley.
Thanks for the question. I think that we'll find as this conversation moves forward that all these topics are interrelated. From the opiate addiction to the budget to facilities to instruction, it's all part of the same system. And for me, it's personal. I have a 6-year-old who's challenged with autism. He's a very loving and enthusiastic little boy named Artie, and he needs that one-to-one instruction to really shine. And so when it comes to the switching on and off of aid shifts and cutting aides in particularly, that has a deeper dimension than cutting teachers, which is bad enough. One thing that I would bring to the budget process would be an eye towards economic development, because the school district does have a seat on the Industrial Development Agency Board. But I don't believe that we've truly asserted that seat. The district's budget now is made up of 4 central categories of revenue: state aid, taxes, and something called other revenue, aside from budget balance transfers. That other revenue stream is at 2.5% right now, and I would like to see that go up to at least 6% over the next 3 years. That would fill in your $2.3 million budget gap.
Thank you. Mr. McCall.
I do think we have struck a reasonable balance with this year's budget. Although there are many staff positions, it's important to remember that 17 of those cuts are directly related to the closing of Cayuga Centers. They're not necessarily driven by our current budget. Cayuga Centers left, we operated a school there with 17 staff members that are part of the cut. To close that gap, we're spending $1.3 million in reserves. We have our tax cap is at the maximum to generate revenue from the local tax base, and we try to strike a balance every year between asking the community to pay more and maintaining the services. We're able to continue to maintain the services that we offer in this budget. Although there are some staff reductions, our elementary class sizes have not moved. We have not changed the electives that are offered at the high school. We're continuing our programming. This is the economic reality that this district has faced for a number of years as we continue to battle with our state legislature on the issue of funding. I've talked about this in depth at meetings and anytime somebody sits down and wants to talk about it. Until we get these funding revenues, these funding issues with the state addressed, we're going to continue to have these problems. To Mr. Robley's point, the other revenue that he's speaking about in that budget, well, most of that's Title I, it's grant money. It's our Title I money. It's the money that is used from the state. This governor has a tendency to fund things through grants, and he likes to take a lot of credit for telling us that there's been these massive increases to educational programming, but when he gives us $700,000 a year to run a UPK program and then tells us you must spend $700,000 on a UPK program, that's not really an increase in the educational funding to Auburn. It's another revenue stream to us for a program that he mandates that we run. We've argued against that for a number of years as well. What we need is foundation aid funding in this to help us to meet the budget needs that we have here in the district.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Mr. Gene Greco.
Well, this board has been unbelievable about advocating for foundation aid since our former board member Jason Lesh was on the board. That was the only time that we saw a little development because they rated Auburn as a high-need school district and we got some extra funding. Since then, it went back the other way. We've been in Albany. We've been at the teachers or the New York State School Boards Conference in Lake Placid last year. We had 90 school districts in one room that we organized to talk about foundation aid. And the foundation aid is so screwed up, to put it bluntly, that some districts won't budge on it because even though they're a smaller district than us with smaller kids, they're getting more aid. So they're not going to say anything. We're trying to get everybody to rally around the cause and make it fair. When you look at what Dr. Timms has been showed us at several seminars in Auburn here, where the money's going down in Suffolk County, Long Island, stuff like that, that's where the votes are for political office. And it's so unfair. And without these funds, we can't produce the programs, and we have to sit as a board and painfully go over potential cuts, and we don't want to do that because ultimately it hurts our children. We know what's at stake, but we're working vigorously as a board that we are right now in every aspect to try to get more funding.
Thank you, Mr. Gene Greco. We'll finish with Mr. Phillips.
I think the folks who spoke before me have made some very valid points. I think this all starts with the foundation aid. We spend less per pupil than any district in this county. We get less from the state. So our kids are getting 36% less than the kids in Jordan Elbridge are, just a few miles down the road. But I do want to address a few things. Mr. Giangreco mentioned, we've been lobbying, going to Albany, having forums, and that's good, and I appreciate that work that they've been doing. I've been going to the school board meetings pretty regularly. I have not seen anyone from our local elected body at any of those meetings. I haven't seen anyone from Assemblyman Finch's office, Senator DeFrancisco's office, the governor's office. I don't know if they've been invited. I will tell you, decisions don't get made by asking nicely. I think we need to go and make a stink. We've seen that with tackling our water problems in this city and in this county, and I think that we need to make a little bit more effort on that regard. Cayuga Centers was also mentioned. There's a, we have this $2.3 million deficit. Last year, they were staffed for 35 students. I sat through a presentation. They had fewer students than that, and the way the reimbursements work is that those children are reimbursed from the counties that they come from. So when they have fewer students, that means our district loses, and us as taxpayers have to pay more. So we went into this school year, and they said, we're projecting this many students. Again, they did not meet that, and then they shut down in the middle of the year. And I went to that school board meeting, and there was a lot of consternation about how this board found out and how the district found out, and that's all valid. But we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars by not negotiating that contract properly with Cayuga Centers. And so we're losing teachers and teachers' aides as a result.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Three of you have raised your hand and we'll go in the order I saw you. So Mr. Robley, then Mr. Giangreco, then Mr. McCall, and if the other two want to chime in, we'll go there. You're first, sir.
Thank you. Just to Mr. McCall's point, being on the school board is a little bit like being the governor's human shield at times, because there's decisions made and you have very little agency over how the money is directed and how it's spent. And, then the governor will come out and say, I'm going to give $1 billion extra dollars to education. And it sounds like a big number, $1 billion. But $700 million of that goes to New York City alone. And so $300,000 of that big $1 billion is supposed to be spread out across the rest of upstate New York and 1.6 million students. So it is a little bit of a joke. However, we keep talking about foundation aid, and it is a problem. It needs to be fixed. But I just think that there are other ways we could turn outward, and if we were a little bit more creative with the resources that the school district had, we could move in the direction of creating extra revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Giangreco, you have 1 minute.
Yes, in response to what Ian was talking about, we do extend a constant invitation to all our legislative people to come to any board meeting that they wish to attend. However, I just want to make note of the fact we're going to be losing Senator DeFrancisco, as you all read in the paper. He's been a friend to the Auburn School District on many, many occasions. This board and members of the board have sat in his office countless times to advocate for funds, and he has come across on some of them. Senator Helming the same way. When Senator Nunzolio was here, he helped us immensely, and Gary Finch has helped us. But the most effective thing we did, we took kids to sit in the legislative chambers in Albany, and they asked these people point blank, what are you going to do about things that affect me? And that was the most effective thing we could have done at that time. And our children did as part of a journalism class. It was amazing the response we got. And that's where the parents, children, and us advocating together for the same cause.
Thank you. Mr. McCall.
I just want to clarify a few points with regards to the Cayuga Centers closing that were made earlier that are simply not accurate. This district, we were in negotiations with Cayuga Centers as early as the fall of this year when we realized that their staffing numbers were down. Cayuga Centers did not cost the district money to operate on a yearly basis. We bill the individual counties on a per student basis for the tuition. That funding is used to offset the costs that the district had to operate the school at Cayuga Centers. The Cayuga Centers made assurances to this district as to what their student population numbers would be, and we realized very quickly that he was not meeting those numbers. We negotiated a tuition increase with Cayuga Centers at a board meeting prior to him closing it. We understood that there was a shortfall there. We were promised by the operations people at Cayuga Centers that that facility was going to continue to operate and that this district would be made completely whole with any financial shortcomings that were coming our way. So the idea that this board didn't know what was happening at Cayuga Centers, the idea that this board didn't address the issue at Cayuga Centers, the idea that this board didn't protect the financial interests of the taxpayers at Cayuga Centers simply isn't correct.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Mr. Phillips, and then Ms. Rhodes will close us out. That's how I've identified you all.
Thank you.
I mean, I've spoken to several board members, ones that aren't sitting here, and they appreciate that, you know, while those promises were made, it doesn't appear that at this point that they've been kept. as far as lobbying goes, I think, you know, Kathy Hochul was in town to give a budget presentation several months ago. We knew that more cuts were coming down the pike. I think that it's incumbent upon the district, whether it's staff or board members, to you know, get out there at those budget hearings and say, this is what's coming down for us. You know, we had a larger than average tax increase last year and still lost 10 positions. This year we're going to have a smaller increase and lose 28 positions. This isn't the fault of this board, but I think that when these elected officials come in town for a photo op, we have to kind of seize that moment and make ourselves heard. I think it's a great idea to bring students, and I was in a room when I think students saved the jobs that were going to be lost at Cuga Centers.
Thank you.
I appreciate the students' voice.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Ms. Rhodes, you'll close us out on this particular item.
Sure. Just a note on Cuga Centers. I worked there. I was the principal there, and I also saw how things worked there. Mr. Hayes was very vocal in saying that we were going to keep our school going. So we believed that. So as the board, that's where we stood. We believed what the administration was telling us. We don't have access to records, so we can't see exactly what's going to happen or how things are going in their program. But knowing how those teachers are our teachers, and we needed to save them, and we needed to work in saving those positions. As for the budget, we work hard. We work hard as we can do to make our budget fair for the community and make it fair for our teachers and for everyone to have a fair and equitable budget to be presented.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. I do rarely do this, but I do sometimes clarify if people use terms or times. You were not the principal this spring.
No, I am a retired principal.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
I just think we need to clarify when people use terms or dates. Mr. Boyer.
Thank you. Another nice discussion on the budget, by the way. Thank you for that, and we'll keep going. But in terms of potential other areas of balancing the budget, I think Mr. McColl brought up the $1.32 million in fund balance that's in this budget proposal. That's actually a little less than what you used last year, about $270,000 less, and it does leave a 4% fund balance in place. Why not consider using more of that in order to save a few jobs or even possibly lower the tax levy?
Okay. Mr. Robley, you're up first.
Well, formulating a budget is tough work, and you do have to think ahead. Okay, you can't raise your fund every time there's a rainy day. But again, if the district was able to start to plan and work towards being more creative with the resources it has, we have acres and acres that we're not using, that we own. I say we, I'm not elected yet, apologize. The school district owns unused acres that sit dormant. There are a number of ways that the school district could take that 2.5% of other revenue and increase it to 6%. And to rely on Title I or other state government programs that we know are flawed, that we've established are flawed, just seems to be doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, to return to the same well that's been poisoned. Let's look for different ways to create revenue, and then maybe we can bridge those budget gaps a little bit easier, or at least make them less painful.
Thank you, Mr. Robley. We'll now hear from Mr. McColl.
Well, the issue about digging too deep into the 4% fund balance that we have, one, we need it, and we've used it. I mean, 2 years ago, we needed that funding to pay the healthcare costs in the district. We had exceeded the budget line item for our healthcare costs, and we needed fund balance to pay the healthcare costs for the last 3 months of the district for the school year. If we have any major expense that comes up now, we've had water main breaks at our buildings recently. If we were to lose a roof at one of the elementary schools or something that is outside of the warranty, we do not currently have a capital project in this district to cover those costs. So that would be a dollar for dollar expense for the district. So to spend our fund balance in a one-shot manner to try to save jobs, although it would be nice, once that money's gone, it's not available to us for any other use, and we use it routinely. That 4% fund balance, any conversation with our business official will tell you, we need that fund balance money as a cash flow as well. The revenue from the state comes in at different times sporadically throughout the year, and we need that money in those accounts sometimes just to cover the payroll because the state lottery check hasn't come in, the state aid hasn't come in, the tax revenue hasn't come in, and we have significant outlays in this district, and that 4% more than anything is used for cash flow to make sure that we can pay our bills in a timely manner. It would be nice if we had more to spend. This year we're spending $1.3 million of our reserves, but again, once that money's gone, it's gone for good, and our reserves, if you look over time, have gradually dwindled. We work very hard to put money back there as fast as we can, and try to maintain reserves in this district because I think it's a prudent and responsible thing to do, but we simply can't spend all of our reserves all of the time. We have to have a rainy day fund, and we've got to keep money in that fund balance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCall. Mr. Giangreco.
Well, I concur with what Mike has been saying. Mike has been a great president, number one. He knows all the figures. He's probably the guy on the board, the go-to board for the figures. And he's very aware of what's going on. And in talking about spending the reserves, we painstakingly took a look at everything and used as much as that as possible to bring back staff without endangering the future of the school district for emergencies. At present, like I said, I'm chairman of the facilities committee. We're looking at some roofs in the very near future that have reached their lifespan. And if we don't, say they go right now or by next winter, and you have one that goes, you've got to have some money on hand to pay somebody right up front because we're not going to get that aidable tax money without a capital project. So you got to have some money, like Andy said, for a rainy day when something happens like that. So it would be stupid and dangerous to spend it all, okay? The teachers have graciously worked along with us on what transpired at Cuca Centers. Between the teachers union and the school board, they worked diligently to save things. What an amazing experience that was. The teachers union and the school district and the Board of Education working together, and we helped a lot of people right up until the end of June, and very painstakingly had to do that. But I laud their leadership, our leadership, Mike and Kathy here, and all the discussion we've had about saving jobs and everything, and where we're going in this district. We've got a plan. And a couple of the amendments that are on for your consideration too are for reserves. And those are for emergencies. Okay, one is to take care of the turf, of course, in 15 years when the top layer needs redoing. The other one is a insurance policy for the district for all the needs that we need now. So we're not going to have to hit the taxpayer. It's money in the bank.
Thank you, Mr. Giangreco. Mr. Phillips, you have 2 minutes. This is on the issue of the fund balance.
I would say when I've gone to these meetings, and I've been going pretty regularly, I haven't seen a discussion when it comes to these 28 job losses of how that's going to impact class sizes. So we've talked a lot about the jobs that are going to be lost, and those are certainly important to those individual people. But for me to properly weigh, should we have a 4% fund balance or a 3% fund balance, I want to know how many, our math classes being combined as a result. And I unfortunately, I didn't see too much of that discussion at the meetings that I went to. I think that this all comes back down to foundation aid. I mean, if you are following at home, don't play any games when you hear that word foundation aid of any kind when you hear that. But, when you look at Southern Cuga, they're spending $25,000 per student. We're spending $18,000. That's $7,000 different for every one of our 4,000 plus students. We should have $22.6 million more than we have in our current budget. Our students deserve it. And what the state is basically saying to us is that our children are worth 37, 38% less than the students just a few miles away from us. And I'm going to fight like tooth and nail to get every single one of those dollars, because when you move on from 8th grade to 9th grade, you don't get 8th grade back. I've sat in class sizes where I've been teaching 45 kids. It's a hard thing to do. It's an impossible thing to do, and our kids don't deserve that. So, you know, we've just got to work harder. And I don't mean to attack this board. I'm applauding everything they've done with the challenges that we've faced. I just think that on that particular issue, I think that we could do more, and I'm prepared to do more.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Ms. Rhodes, you'll close us out on a 2-minute response, and then I know we have some 1 minutes after that. So.
Okay. As for the reserves, I believe that we need to have money in the reserves in case something does happen. It's just as Mr. McCall said and as Sam has said, we have to have money in our reserves in case something happens in our buildings that is going to be catastrophic. Or, I mean, even just a water main break, it costs us. The other thing that I have to say is our class sizes are going to stay the same. Our class sizes, that's a goal of this board, is that our class sizes do not get over, I believe we have it for, most of our class sizes are 20 to 25 students in a classroom. That's what we have in the elementary. And I know that we try to keep that as our goal, and we don't let that exceed any 25 students. We would add another teacher if we have. We also have usually put a teacher in reserve. In the past, that's when we had more finances. We did have a teacher in reserve, but if we have to hire another teacher for a 3rd grade class, it's going to have 30 students. We would hire another teacher that's going to be for those students.
Thank you. I noticed, Mr. Robley, you would like to respond for 1 minute.
Yeah, I just want to add that in defense of this board and in defense of boards everywhere across the state, the New York State SED has essentially incentivized the shrinking of class sizes. Since 1962, when they introduced a budget category called size correction, today it's known as the reorganization incentive, and it's couched within the building aid that each district gets. So it puts an incentive on increasing class sizes, creating efficiency and saving space to the tune of tens of millions of dollars every year. To some of the other points that have been made, I would like to know why this district receives such poor marks in the usage of data when it comes to spending decisions that do impact student achievement. The most recent state report that I had access to, which I believe was 15 or 16, cited the district for that. A lack of policy and protocols regarding spending, using data to judge spending decisions that impact student achievement.
Thank you, Mr. Robley. Okay. Just as we're a third through,
Halfway,
so I just want to know we're a third through. So
Okay.
we're a little over a third through. You are watching the Auburn Enlarged School Board Forum. We have with us all 5 candidates for the school board. Ian Phillips, who is a first-time candidate, Kathleen Rhodes, who is seeking a 3rd term, Andrew Robley, who is served once and is running for a new term, Michael McCall, who is the board chair, and Sam Giangreco, who is seeking a 4th term. They're being asked questions by Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer.
All right, maybe I'm going to throw this out as sort of like, does anyone, raise your hand if, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it if everyone's on the same page. But one other option that the board certainly could have looked at was exceeding the tax cap, and that would require then a supermajority of voters to approve the budget. It's not unprecedented. I think it was done, maybe Sam, 5 or 6 years ago.
2012.
Okay, so any consideration, should that have been done or not? Anyone think yes? Sam?
Well, as you know, that this community graciously last year voted for a tax increase. And we thank them so very, very much for that, because they made a huge difference. But you can't keep going back to the well, which is the taxpayers, every year, every year, every year. The whole key, and everybody, I can't keep pounding this away as much as I possibly can, foundation aid. Does anybody realize that New York State owes the Auburn School District at this point $11 million that we're never going to see? Do you know how many teachers that could have supplied? How many programs we could have had in the Auburn School District? And not hit the taxpayer for anything even last year? They owe us money in the rears. We've gone to legislators and pleaded our case. I remember we were in Albany, we went through a series of offices, and unbeknownst to me, and it kind of blew me away, some of the people that we went to see had one of those theater chains, like, you know, when you're in a theater waiting in line, and with a sign on it said out to lunch. And I out to lunch on two parts, one for not listening to us, and actually being out to lunch and not being there to listen to us. So we flooded them with cards, postcards, and everything, and got very, very little response. Dr. Timms, who presented all the facts, and he's dead on with them, they don't want to hear from him. He's got the truth. He knows what they owe us, and all we want to do is get the money. That's it.
All right.
Did not know if anybody else wanted to
No one
chime
wanted.
in
No one
on
wanted to go over
above the tax cap.
There was a little bit of discussion about that and the board, but it didn't take. For each 1% that we increase taxes in the community, it generates about $300,000 in income. Last year, this community came through with almost a 4% tax increase. One of the things that hurts us with the tax cap is, although it's commonly referred to as the 2% tax cap, it is neither 2% nor was it ever designed to be. It's a number you arrive at the end of a 9-step mathematical formula, and it fluctuates every year. 2 years ago, our tax cap number was 0.12%. It generated less than $50,000 in additional revenue to the district. The year after that, it's 4. This year, it's 1.58. That's more of an issue with the tax cap for us than trying to exceed it. Is if we could just get a number that was consistent throughout time, so we would have some sort of idea as to what our revenue stream would be in the outlying years, would be helpful.
Ms. Rhodes.
I just think that the community has been wonderful. They are very supportive of the school district and the students. I think sometimes that you have to be fiscally responsible to them. I mean, look at our community now. We have many small businesses, but how many big businesses in Auburn? We have the prison, we have Nucor, and we have the hospital and the school district. NYSEG was once big, but it's not as big as it used to be. So where do you want to where can we get this money from? I mean, businesses have been very supportive. They've been very supportive of our students, supporting our students, and doing mentorships for our students. But sometimes you just have to keep within the bounds.
Gentlemen, anything to add? No? Okay. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Well, kind of a bigger picture question for everyone is I don't know if any of you have used this term, but I've heard it. I know from Mr. Pirozzolo and some others that there's a real the term lighthouse district. Let's make Auburn a school district that people actually want to move into Auburn because of the schools. That it's a place, instead of a place where people get away from, they move here because of how great the education programs are. My question for everyone is, how close are we to being a lighthouse district, if we're not there already? And what needs to happen in order to get there, if you don't think we're there yet?
And following the rotation, Mr. McCall, you're first on this one.
I've heard that term frequently. I agree with it, and I think it's something that we should be doing here in Auburn. How close? I think you can argue in some ways we're there. In other ways, we have a ways to go. The way you get there is you offer stimulating instruction by professional staff members in modern facilities, and I think we've gone a long way towards doing that. It's a constant process in this district to upgrade, modernize. If you haven't seen the new technology wing at the Auburn Junior High, you should go. Go look at that. Go look at what Holland Stadium looks like today compared to what it looked like 2 years ago. There have been significant renovations to classrooms throughout the district. There are massive technology upgrades planned this year. We're spending over $3 million this summer to upgrade the technology throughout the district. We have a new engineering, biomedical science programs at the junior high and high school that the kids are flocking to. We continue to offer as much educational opportunity to these students that we possibly can, and I maintain that you're seeing the results. If you come to Auburn, put in 4 hard years at the high school, our students are going on to Ivy League schools. Our students are going on to the military academies. Our students are going on to the top state universities and private universities in around the country. We have students right now at Yale. We have a student at Georgetown. We have our valedictorian is going to Dartmouth next year. We have many students in the military academies. We have students that go on to military service and to careers in the job force. If you come to Auburn, you're going to get a high quality education that's going to open doors for you. No matter what you choose to do in your life, you can do that with an Auburn education. And I'm very proud of that and the success that we see year after year after year. I've been standing on the stage for 4 years, well, this will be my 4th year, shaking the hands of the graduates, and I'm very proud of where these kids have gone in the time that I've been on this board.
Thank you. Mr. Giangreco, on the issue of a lighthouse district.
Well, in many, I agree with Mike, in many aspects it already is a lighthouse district. But think of this. We spend $17,000 plus to educate a child here in Auburn, and the New York State average is $23,300 to educate a child. Think about the results we're getting with having to deal with less. We're getting less money per kid, and we're producing an 84% graduation rate. That is success. That marks a lighthouse. If I was somebody on the outside wanting to come to a nice place to live, beautiful buildings, great teachers, great administration, and a nice atmosphere, I'd come to Auburn, New York, because that's what's drawing it here. The success of our kids, the success of our teachers, and they're making do with having to work with less. This is incredible. We got a gold mine here that we need to tap into. And again, if we had that money, my God, the stuff we could do in the Auburn School District is phenomenal. We could offer programs that be next to none. I mean, it's so needed. If we could just get that foundation aid where it's supposed to be and be fair, boy, could we do some things. That's a lighthouse district.
Mr. Phillips, lighthouse district.
I agree with everything that Mr. McColl and Mr. Giangreco have already said. We are achieving a tremendous amount, and that's a testament to the educators, the aides, bus drivers, custodians, and this board. I am, frankly, though, I'm tired of being told that we need to do more with less. I want to do more with more. And I believe that my expertise is in fighting for that aid. I know that we're the biggest district in this county by far. We have over 4,000 students. The next biggest is around 1,300. I believe one source of revenue that we could look into is offering more AP classes, international baccalaureate, electives in art and music that these other smaller districts can't afford to provide, and allowing those students to come in and pay partial tuition to attend those magnet programs. It's something that's been tried in districts in Connecticut, and I believe that on a smaller scale we can do the same thing here in Auburn. But ultimately we have to fight for that foundation aid. I believe we absolutely should be a lighthouse district for this community. I'm proud of the development that I've seen in Auburn, in our downtown, in our neighborhoods. And our district is doing a great job, but I think that it can do even better, and I'm prepared to do that work to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Ms. Rhodes.
I think the district works very hard in making Auburn a lighthouse district. I think we are on the road to being a lighthouse district. We offer our students Project Lead the Way in engineering and the biomedical. I've seen both of those programs, and they're outstanding. And the kids that are in those programs, they're going on to colleges. One of the girls that I was talking to is going to Tufts University in the fall. Our students are going on to colleges in the fall. I'm on the committee for the scholarship committee. The number of students that are applying for scholarships is incredible, and where they're going for school is our Ivy League schools. They're going into colleges that, you wouldn't think that around here that these students would be able to get into. It's just amazing to see where our students are going. We offer the AP courses and the QGIT Advanced courses here. I think we are giving our students a good education, and they are going and they are mastering skills that are above and beyond. But I think we still have a lot of work to do. We always have a lot of work to do, and I would never say that we are there yet.
Thank you. Mr. Robley.
I think over the course of Auburn School District's history, it's been a lighthouse district. You know, when this board was formed in 1850, and the first school board ordinance was formed, it was one of the first 10 school districts in New York State to fully integrate racially integrated students, which is a wonderful legacy for this school district. 100 years later, in the middle of the 20th century, we had 3 high schools which offered skills-based, focused track learning. And that was also a wonderful model and a place where people were proud to send their kids. Now we're bogged down with, you know, modules designed by people who aren't necessarily teachers that we are mandated to teach to, and it's a sad day. So I'm very happy that that we're thinking about opening up new avenues of curriculum. There's also ways to generate that lighthouse district with some interesting programs, like if the district wanted to engage in economic development with the city, tax increment financing. That is something that in New York State, a school district must be a partner with the city, and it does not burden the taxpayer. It is it stimulates private investment, and it's a self-perpetuating development tool. But it must be approved by a school district. It's only been done twice in New York State. And if we could do something like that, then we could work towards attracting more businesses, like Kathy was talking about. And with more business, we get a lower tax burden, right? If we can get more taxpayers, we'll broaden the tax base and the burden will be less for everyone.
Thank you. I saw Mr. Phillips, you have 1 minute.
We all spoke quite a bit, and folks mentioned the Ivy League universities that folks have gone to, and we should certainly be proud of that. We have to be a district, and when we talk about Lighthouse District, that educates all children and all avenues, and I know we do a good job of that too. We have to provide vocational opportunities for children that aren't going to college. We have a lack of people in the skilled trades in this area, and so we need to tell people about those jobs and those opportunities as they exist. And I think we can be doing more of that. I would like to see us be doing more with our universal pre-K programs and our providers and how those projects are implemented. Every one of those things, you know, small improvements make big differences, and then we need to tell our story. Part of the Lighthouse is they have to turn the light on. And so we all know how successful our district has been. I think most of us are products of and Auburn graduates. So I think it's time to turn the light on and let people know the great things that are happening in Auburn.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. This leads, Mr. Giangreco is going first on this one.
He is.
I think you're a good person to start this one because I'm going to ask building projects. Do we need to do another one in the next 12 months? And if so, what, you know, give me a 30,000 foot, but, you know, what size, what rough cost will we be thinking about?
Okay. Well, as I said before, I'm chairman of the facilities committee, and we have a good committee made up of board members and architects and so on and so forth. We're looking at a lot of improvements, but right now we're very concerned with roofs on several of the buildings because they're going to reach the date of their useful life as well as the warranty. So we have to look at that first. We're doing upgrades in technology with the smart schools provisions that are out there. We're doing for safety, which is huge with me right now. We're putting in these card reader machines like you see in the hospitals. So you put your license in there and it tells you if you have any convictions and so on and so forth. So we got a red flag if we've got some people that shouldn't be in a building. We're looking and discussing about security measures and what we can do to tighten up our buildings. We're a lot of improvements on how education and building renovations will look in the future, how it will help teachers. Some of the architects have been meeting with Krista Martin, and we're just discussing, as well as the committee, and we intend to have the community very shortly involved, as well, and the stakeholders, as to how the renovations on the horizon are going to affect the teaching in the future. Different concepts of how rooms are laid out, how big they are. For example, East Middle School, or Auburn Junior High School, that was built in the 30s in the WPA. And some of those classrooms are way below what they should be as far as space and room for teaching. We're talking about enlarging some of those rooms. We're talking about some potential additions to make it more feasible in that building. It's one of the most beautiful buildings we have. But we're also looking at improvements in all the buildings, so teaching will be enhanced by what we make the building look like, and how spacious it is, how bright it is for lighting, how the heating is, so on and so forth. A lot of things are on the horizon. I invite anybody who wants to come to our meeting to check it out.
Thank you, Mr. Giangreco. Mr. Phillips, on the idea of a building project.
I mean, in this time of kind of belt tightening and we're losing staff all the time, I think that has to be the priority over any type of building projects. That being said, when we closed down West Middle School, which I'm a proud graduate of West Middle School, the changes of moving the 6th graders into the elementary buildings is, you know, in some of our elementary buildings, I've heard from teachers in those buildings, it definitely presents challenges, and our facilities weren't necessarily prepared to take those on. I think a lot of them have been addressed or are being addressed, but if there were to be any capital improvements and renovations, I'd start at places like Casey Park, where I'm told they have 500 students in that building. It's very crowded, and I think that things like that, to alleviate certain, you know, specific problems rather than kind of putting on a glossy new coat of paint, have to be our priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Ms. Rhodes.
I think with the building projects, the things that we have to remember is, looking at our district, Auburn High is the newest building we have. That's our newest building, and that was built in '71. Most of the other buildings were all built, and Andy's the historian, so he can tell you exactly when they all have been built. But they're older buildings. And with older buildings, you have issues. So the fact that we do go out for a capital project, we are looking at needs in the buildings that we want to keep up. If we keep up with those needs, then we don't have a huge issue facing us that's going to cost us millions of dollars. That's the reason that we do keep up with these building projects. The thing that when we talk about these building projects, we're talking about major things. We're talking about roofs, we're talking about furnaces, we're talking about class sizes, we're looking at space. Yes, because we do have to have, you can only have a certain number of students in a square space, so you have to measure that out. So for projects that we have going or we would like to bring forward, it's usually because we have a need and we need to take care of that need.
Thank you. Mr. Robley.
Thanks. So I really don't think that age has much to do with, the age of a building has much to do with student achievement, and that's based on 2 years of study working in my master's. There is an ocean of studies available that tell us that the condition of the building affects student achievement, not the age. There are plenty of districts around that take care of their historic buildings that have high student achievement, and there are plenty of poor districts that have brand new buildings who are failing their students. Okay, so the capital projects are important, but the system itself is flawed. And maybe if there was some advocacy to change the building aid formula and the way that's dispersed, we wouldn't have some of the problems we do. For example, in 2007, something known as the minor maintenance and repair budget line was rolled into the flexible aid category for school districts. And so a lot of school districts, because they're facing tight budgets, deferred much of their maintenance, which then leads to the need for more capital projects, which are mandated every 5 years by the state. I'm not going to have enough time to answer this question, but So let me give you one example. Genesee Elementary completed $1.6 million in capital projects last year. Yet my son, who goes there, informs me that there's an established ant colony in the lunchroom. And I just learned this within the past few days, so this is why you guys haven't heard about it yet. He doesn't know, he doesn't remember how long it's been there. But the interest, okay, capital projects are not a free gift. New York State lends the money, lets you borrow the money, then pays itself back, but we pay the interest. The interest on that project alone was $32,000. Spread that over 5 years, the 5-year project, and then spread that all across the 5 schools. The amount of interest that we're paying in these capital projects starts to add up. If a portion of that money was given from the state to maintenance, proper maintenance of the building, we wouldn't need those huge projects in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. We'll go with Mr. McCall, your final person up on this one.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that you will see a capital project on the horizon here in the district, primarily for one reason. One, to Mr. Robley's point, every 5 years, New York State requires that school districts complete what's known as a building condition survey, which is a soup to nuts evaluation of all of the buildings in the district. Every problem, every conceivable issue in a district is prioritized by your architectural firm and your facilities committee that Sam has been a chairman of for years, sits down and looks at those priorities and tries to figure out, okay, what are we worried about this year, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now? If you don't have a capital project in place and you suffer a major failure of a boiler system, of a roof, some sort of structural flaw in the building, the taxpayers in the community are going to pay that repair dollar for dollar. If you have a capital project in place, Auburn's reimbursement rate is roughly 85%. Fluctuates year to year, but right now on a capital project, we pay 15 cents on the dollar, the state pays 85%. Mr. Robley is correct, the system is flawed, but most of the things with regard to state funding in New York State education are flawed. Building aid is a separate line item than foundation aid and reimbursable aid. So sometimes people think that if you have a building project, that means you're going to have to eliminate teachers or you're going to have to make cuts somewhere else. New York State funds it differently. We cannot use building aid revenue to pay teachers. We cannot use reimbursable aid to fix buildings. It's all line items, it's all categories. I do believe that you're going to see a capital project on the horizon. I know that we're in active discussions. The facility committee has looked at it for the last 2 years, and I believe there'll be one proposed probably within the next year that the board will identify what we feel are the priorities and come up with some sort of cost and begin the conversation with the community to let them know what we're thinking and to get the feedback from them. But we absolutely will have a capital project in the district, because if we don't, we're risking financial ruin.
Okay, two of you have indicated you want to speak again. Mr. Robley, you get another bite at the apple for a minute.
Sure.
With or without ants in the cafeteria?
Well, I could talk about this subject for a long time, but I'll just say that relating this back to the bellwether or the lighthouse district concept, I think that we do need to engage our historic buildings in a different way, and we could do that by pushing for either a local ordinance, okay, which would send a message to the state that we care about these buildings, and advocating for passage of a law in New York State, which sounds like a big mountain to climb, but which would allow historic schools to benefit from the Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. Now, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia introduced a bill that would allow that across the country last year. Of course, you never heard anything about it for obvious reasons, but it got swallowed up in the Senate and was never passed. If we could do something like that at the state level, and we started the advocacy here, that would be at least one step towards turning on that light.
Thank you. Mr. Giangreco, you have 1 minute on this subject as well.
Okay. If I didn't make this quite clear, we are working on a capital project at present, and I just want to give you the status. The statistics that we provided and all the information is in the architect's hands as I speak. We have another meeting on the 14th, the day before the election, and we're going to be discussing exactly the timeline about when we're going to roll one out. So that's about the capital project. And as far as Andy's concerned there, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to call our superintendent of buildings and grounds and make sure he calls the Orkin man, because I don't want any ants in our schools.
Just as a just to let you know where we are, we're a little over 2/3 of our way through our Auburn Large School Board Forum for 2018. We have with us candidates Ian Phillips, Kathleen Rhodes, Andrew Robley, Michael McColl, and Sam Giangreco. They are being asked questions by Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer.
All right, now I'm going to do my round of ambush questions.
Okay.
So here we go. Just kidding, these are easy, but I do have a question for each individual candidate up here that I want to talk about.
So is it only for those candidates?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, if
so how we
after
will
they
handle,
answer it, then
so how
go
we
ahead.
will handle that is if it's if it's to you, you have 2 minutes to respond. Any of your opponents want to chime in, they have 1 minute, so we can move through these.
Okay.
Is that all right with you?
Yep. I'll start with Mr. Phillips. The question is your employment with the NYSET, with the New York State United Teachers, has a potential to create a conflict when it comes to the school district having to go through contract negotiations and anything that would involve, labor relations. When you're sitting on the school board, how will you handle that potential conflict? Will you recuse yourself from certain kinds of votes or taking part in certain executive sessions because of, basically two different obligations you may have going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's thank you for the question, first of all. I think it's important to address. My role in the organization is I don't negotiate any contracts, so I'm not aware of anything that's going on as far as that goes. I mean, we live in a small town. I think all of us up here and certain members of the board now have spouses that are employed by the district, and that's always been the case. So I think that there's always going to be some tie to the district or tie to education in our community. It's one of the biggest employers in our community. I believe that why I believe unions are a force for good in public education comes from my experience as an educator in Detroit. When I was a teacher, the district and the politicians, basically, they could care less. My class size went from 25 in my 8th grade to 47 over a 3-week span. And the only group that was advocating for my students was that union that was fighting for those smaller class sizes and fighting for more desks and more space in my class. And I think we're seeing that all across the country. Teachers in Oklahoma were offered a 20% raise on the meager salary that they get in that state, and they said no. We don't have books. We have, we have chairs that are falling apart, and so until those needs are met, they're not going back. So I feel like teachers' organizations and our school-related professional organizations are a continuation of my long-term advocacy for schools, and I'm proud to work for New York State United Teachers. On specific matters, if I get legal advice from the district's attorneys or from someone else that says we think it's better that you set this one out, absolutely, without question. But I think in most cases that's not going to be an issue at all.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Not seeing anybody wanting to chime in.
Alrighty.
Mr. Boyer.
Sort of a combination question for Kathleen or for Ms. Rhodes and Mr. McColl. You've been board president for 4 years, and I know the district until this year, and you addressed it when you decided to do a 4th year, had an informal policy of cycling presidents out after 3 years to kind of keep fresh ideas going. And you've been the vice president for 4 years. So my question for you is, are you planning to stick and go for a 5th year as president, do you think? Or why or why not? And then Ms. Rhodes, why haven't you considered or why haven't you stepped up to be president yet? And would you do that coming forward in the next term? So whoever wants to go first with that.
Well, we'll start with Mr. McColl because that's who we'll go in order. So
I do not intend to seek the president for the 5th term. We have had a bit of a gentleman's agreement for the past couple of years, or the past couple of terms, that the president would only serve 3 years. I had individuals talk to me last year about doing a fourth term because we had individuals who I believe are interested or ready for leadership positions that quite frankly had personal issues and did not want to take on responsibility. There is some additional work that goes with that position, and some people just didn't feel that they were in a position either with their personal or professional life to take on that additional responsibility. I do not intend to serve as the president next year. We have several very, very gifted people on this board that I think are more than capable of taking on a leadership position, and I would encourage them to do it. Kathy has been a great vice president for me. She's covered for me many times when my professional responsibilities take me out of town stuff, and I think Kathy and I have worked very well together for the past couple of years. But as far as being president, no. If I'm lucky enough to be reelected, I will be a board trustee sitting off to the right, critiquing whoever the president or vice president is next year.
Ms. Rhodes, will you be seeking the presidency then?
Actually, yeah, I would, if I'm elected, which we haven't even gotten to. If I am elected, yes, I would consider being president. I will tell you this, it is an incredible amount of work to be in any of the leadership positions because I'm retired. I don't have another job to do. Where if you have a job, you have other responsibilities. You get called, you have letters from parents, you have letters, most letters are people that, have an issue that they want settled. I mean, you have to have time to go, and you need to be able to go and talk to the administration to say, this is what I'm receiving, I need to know what's going on, I want to know how, which way, how I am to respond to it. Not only are you have agenda planning, you have to be at many of the functions, and football games, you have plays, you have concerts, you have to be visible for the community to be able to talk to you. So you're not only president going to 2 meetings a month, you have many, many responsibilities within the district. So, I mean, anybody that is on the school board knows that, and they will see that it's a very busy, and your time is used, and it's going to be something that you really have to be aware of. I know Andy has been on the board; he knows, but there is a lot of things that you have to be at, and I think that sometimes that is forgotten.
Seeing no one chiming in, Mr. Boyer.
All right, let's go to Mr. Robley.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've been mispronouncing your name for so long. For you, you did get elected to this position once before and stepped down before the term ended to work on furthering your education. But I think a fair question for voters to hear your answer to is why should they trust you to not do, not fill out this term? I mean, everyone holds the lever for someone that they think will fill out the term. So can you speak to that a little bit?
That is a good question. Thank you. Well, I will tell you that my decision to leave the board before was not easy. I have a chain of emails with my board president. Will I go? Will I not go? Will I go? Will I not go? Ultimately, it was decided for me. There was a mandated sequence of classes that was scheduled for Tuesday nights at 7. So I did step down. But I will say that the entire time I was away, the entire course of study that I engaged in at Cornell University was directed to one purpose, which was to serve this school district. My entire thesis, 150 and more pages, was essentially a history of this district, some of the problems it faces with regards to facilities and how to change that. So there wasn't a day that went by in my studies that I wasn't working for this district. And now I'm back. I've bought a home in the community. My kids are in the schools. And I think that should be proof enough to give voters the faith that I'm here for the long run.
Mr. Boyer.
All right, and Mr. Giangreco, noted at the beginning that you and I have been here forever doing this. And, there is the argument over, whatever elected office it is that, hey, it's time for some fresh faces. So why, in your sense, why another term since you've been here for, I think it's 13 plus years now on the board.
Well, it's true. I've been here a long time, but I'll tell you, I got a good pulse on the community. I know a lot of people. I served two terms as vice president, and somebody said to me, "Why don't you be president?" I don't want to be. I'll be honest with you. I'm chairman of the city planning board. I'm on the Emerson Park Commission. I've got 8 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, and more coming. I got my hands full. And my expertise right now is in facilities and the safety of our children in the schools. After hearing all these tragedies around us, I got to do something. My blood is maybe older, but it's fresh, and I can still, get out there with the best of them. And I want to make a difference. I've had tragedy in my family. I don't want to see it happen to anybody else's. And I certainly, as a board member, that's the most awful thing that could possibly happen. I want to try to do my best to prevent that. And I got a lot of energy left, and I want to continue on this board. We got a good working board, and I love Auburn. I love our kids. It's as simple as that. I want to do something for them.
Okay. Mr. Boyer, we're going to get you one more question, 1 minute apiece, though, responses, and we're not going to do any rebuttals on this, so we can get to your closings.
Okay.
Mr. Boyer.
Well,
and Mr. Phillips is up first if it's for everybody.
Gotcha. It is for everyone, and we've touched on school safety a couple times now, and it is a big deal going on everywhere, and all the districts around here have been grappling with it in their budgets this year. So my question for all of you is, do you think Auburn schools are safe, and what added or additional security measures should we be looking to put in?
Mr. Phillips, you have 1 minute.
I do believe that Auburn schools are safe. I think that it's going to be very difficult to take on the scenario that we've seen across the country. It's an impossible to imagine scenario, so that's why it's so difficult to tackle. I think a lot of great ideas are bandied about, but ultimately, you've got madmen with extremely high-powered weapons attacking school children. It's something that we have to do more to prevent, and I really applaud the children of Parkland for stepping up and leading the charge on that. And I think we've seen movement that we've never seen before. And I pray that nothing like that ever is forced upon our children here. Those children have been tremendous advocates. I do not believe making our schools bunkers filled with weapons in the hands of teachers is the answer. And I've talked to hundreds of teachers about that, and they don't think so either. We've got to do everything that we can, but we shouldn't be hardening and bunkerizing our schools. They're places of learning and growth.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Ms. Rose.
I do believe our schools are safe. I do believe that, well, we have our SROs in our buildings, and we've had our SROs in our buildings for several years. So we have been leading the way in that respect. Our SROs have made great bonds with our kids, and I think that has helped us immensely, because I know that our students feel comfortable going to our SROs if they feel something is going to happen or something that has happened. So in that respect, I do believe we have done very well. Could we do more? Absolutely. And I do believe that that's where we should go to our next steps.
Thank you. Mr. Robley.
This is another question that has a pretty personal dimension. I send my kids into Genesee Elementary School every morning and watch the door close behind them. And so the one thing that gives me sense of security, is seeing that SRO out there on the sidewalk. And not just out of fear of a shooting incident or anything like that, but even the traffic situation, which was a mess at Genesee up until recently, and I commend the administration for settling that. When the SRO is standing out on that sidewalk, it changes the entire landscape, just his presence. And when he's walking through the school halls and making relationships with these kids, hopefully they'll grow up and feel like there's someone in authority that they can confide in before they go down the wrong path. And so I think SROs, of course, and everybody's probably going to say the same thing, are vital. But I also think that being able to see who's at the door, something very literal, for every building, being able to see who's at the door and having somebody make the decision whether or not to let them in is key.
Thank you. Mr. McCall, on the issue of school safety.
Thank you. I do believe that these buildings are safe. We have gone to great strides in the past several years that I've been on this board to further enhance the security. We have a brand new state-of-the-art video surveillance system all across the district. We have, to Mr. Robley's point, we have controlled entry access points at all of our buildings. That's been recently installed. We've maintained the SRO program even through the most difficult budget times that this district has suffered through. Our administrators and teachers have stressed the importance of the see something, say something to our students and to our community. We're installing this summer the Raptor visitor management system in the district to make sure we know who's in our buildings and why they're there. The lockdown drills that this district has carried on for the better part of a decade have only recently become mandated by the state of New York. We've been on the front end of training our staff, training our students, and safeguarding these buildings. We had a half day of professional development last week with our staff to talk to them about their concerns with safety, get their thoughts as to what the district can do better or should be doing differently. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we understand that it needs to be done, and we're going to continue to work on it.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Mr. Giangreco, the issue of school safety.
Well, as I said before, I believe our schools are safe. However, there's a lot of room for improvement. And what I'd like to propose, and then this goes directly to the governor, I want a SRO in every one of our schools. That's what I want. And I want the $300,000 we spend for the SROs at present, pick up the tab for them. These guys are an important establishment in our buildings. The kids can go to them and tell them things and feel comfortable. They establish relationships with the children. Sometimes they intervene on their social media. They understand the workings of that and all the things that are going on in our buildings. There's many things out there, and it changes daily. But I want to see SROs in all our buildings. I want the faculty to be more educated about the rules of engagement in case something should happen. I want the custodians and the support staff to be fully engaged on what's going on and say something, or see something, say something. Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, thank you for your questions. Well, now, believe it or not, we've gone almost 80 minutes, and we're going to close with your closing statements. As we said, we drew for straws, and we reverse order. So, Mr. Giangreco, you're first up with a 2-minute closing.
Well, once again, thank you for having us and putting on this tremendous forum again. I want to speak to the community in this regard. I love your children. I care about your children. You can depend on me to make a difference as far as anything in my capacity to help our schools be safer. That's paramount with me right now. Along with their academic success, that shares the need right now. There's too much going on in our world, too many crazies out there, and I don't want to see anything happen, and whatever I can do, I will do to protect our children. You can rest assured of that. I love this community. I want to make our schools lighthouse districts. I want people to come to Auburn knowing that our schools are safe and beautiful. I want the improvements and the programs necessary to make our children have every opportunity to pursue their dreams. And that goes well even for the kids that are not so academically in tune with things. Those kids that want to do the arts and music as well. That's very important. And sports. We need the community to become engaged. We need the foundation aid to be more fair. We need your cooperation as citizens and parents and the children as well and the teachers all together to join this crusade and get that foundation aid changed. That will be the answer to all our problems because we'll have the money to do things and the things we need to do. It's so very important. And if I can do anything else, I will do it. But the most important thing is talk to your kids. Hug your kids tonight and realize that their future is in our hands and we need your support to make everything happen for their benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giangreco. We'll now hear from Michael McCall.
Thank you. In a few short weeks, I'm going to be standing on the stage during commencement, shaking the hands of the graduates of the class of 2018. Although a graduation ceremony often marks the end of high school, the word commence actually means begin. And what we're truly marking in a commencement ceremony is not the end of high school, but the beginning of the future for our graduates. The class of 2018, like all those before it, will leave Auburn and begin to make their way in the world. As much as we as parents, teachers, and adults would like to take them by the hand and lead them each step of the way, we can't. Therefore, we must prepare them as best we can while we have them. That's where the school district comes in. During the short time that we have the students, we must teach them the 3 R's. Teach them to respect one another, guide them to make the correct decisions even when it's difficult. Teach them that decisions have consequences and help them to understand the meaning of words like friendship and sportsmanship. All the work I've done on the Board of Education, be it the seemingly endless battles for funding, the discussion about curriculum, the reviewing of contracts, the improvements to the infrastructure, and the myriad of other items that have come before me on the board, it's all done for one purpose: prepare these students for the future. I hope you feel that I've done a good job of that over the past 6 years. I've learned a great deal in my years on the board, and I would very much like to put that experience and knowledge to work, once again, for the students that you as a community entrust to me and this school district. Thank you for watching. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, May 15th. Good night.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Andrew Robley.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I would like to thank everyone at home for watching and for everyone here for giving me the privilege to come speak at this forum. In a speech on the opening of the Auburn Academic High School in 1888, Auburn's very first superintendent, Benjamin B. Snow, made a very short speech in which he included the following sentences. I have no apology to make for advocating education. In this day and age of the world, no one needs to do so. I'm inspired by Superintendent Snow's words. I'm a parent of children in Auburn schools and a property owner, and I will bring new energy and drive to the board. I will never apologize for advocating for education in Auburn. I will never be afraid to speak my mind to any government official, whether my local state representative or even the U.S. Secretary of Education. My children, your children, our neighbors' children, they're all part of the same future. So let's create something new and great together. Honor me with your vote on May 15th. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Kathleen Rhodes.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to remind the community how important it is to vote, not just for the 3 people that would be on the board, but also for the 3 propositions: the budget, the reserve for the turf field, and also the reserve for the capital reserve fund. I thank you for your votes in the past. I hope that people will get out and vote again, and I do appreciate the time that I have served on this board.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, you have 2 minutes.
I want to thank Guy and Jeremy and Cheyenne, who's keeping me on track with time, and all the students that worked really hard to get us set up for this forum. I believe that we're at this very, very critical moment with our schools. The heat is constantly being turned up at the state level in not funding us. And yet more and more mandates about what we teach in our classrooms come down every day. I think that the only way our children can succeed is if we allow for the creativity of our educators to thrive and flourish and grow. And I'm worried about just a general sense of complacency in not tackling some of these issues. I feel like we've done a very good job, and this board has done a very good job of treating kind of the symptoms of this underfunding and these mandates, but we have not dealt with the sickness. And some of these educators that are taking to the streets are saying educators will stay out of politics when politics stays out of education. And it is the time that right now that we have to fight for our schools, because in a couple of years it's going to be too late. We're going to have to close more schools, we're going to have to lay off more people, and we'll never get back to the district that I grew up in and that I love. I'm very proud to have the support of my teachers that I had, my kindergarten teacher, Miss Crowell, Mr. Kennedy, my fantastic 8th grade teacher at West, my teachers at Owasco, Mr. Martin, who made reference to that lighthouse district mentality that we need to strive for. I believe those educators exist in our schools today, and we need to unleash their creativity, and that's what I want to do. So I'd be privileged to have your vote on May 15th, and thank you so much, everybody, for hosting this forum.
Thank you. Thank you all five for not only being here and also your patience as we had some technical problems early on, but also for putting yourselves out there. It is not always an easy task for you or your families, and we thank you for doing that, and we wish you well in the next 10 or 11 days that go before Election Day. We do urge you to go out and vote. We do have a couple of thank yous before we go. We do want to thank Mr. Boyer, who has been here for the last dozen years to ask questions of all of our candidates. We also want to thank Michelle Shelley Major at the school district office, who was very helpful in getting the word out to all the candidates, and we believe that they're all here because she went above and beyond to get candidates aware of the forum and also here. We also want to thank you for tuning in over the last hour and a half. We do this show because it's important to the community. We want to thank the students here as well as the professors because we're taking a hiatus. This is our last show of the season. We'll be back in the fall with Inside Government and be on the front page. But we could not have done this without Professor Steve Keeler, who literally gets into the wiring of this studio. Mike Morano, Doug Brill, Jeff Sesniak, James Reichart over at the Auburn Public Theater, who runs ARMA, and we want to thank them all. I am asking for a point of personal privilege because today is the day after the annual telecom banquet. We are never allowed to do this because this forum is always before the telecom banquet, and we do want to say that we do this with all of the prep here is done with the students in mind, and CU Community College students won awards last night. I just want to give you the list of the top 5 that are annual awards here. The Mark Chico Castiglione Award was, as a commencement award, was won by Gavin Ellis. Telecom Faculty Awards for service to the telecom department went to 4 students, Gabby Rizzo, Matt Lucas, Spencer Kenny, and Mark Fiacco. The Radio Advisors Award for Outstanding Service to the College Radio Station went to Joel Stockton. Telecom Audio Production Award for Excellence in Audio Production goes to Brian Michael Thomas, as well as Jordan Robinson. And last but not least, there is an award named after Vice President Biden's first wife, Neela Hunter Biden, for journalism, and that went to Ed Vivenzio. We congratulate all the students. We thank them for their help over the last several months as we put on both Inside Government, Beyond the Front Page, and these forums. We'll be back in the fall, but before that, on May 15th, we do urge you to go vote. You can go to the polls from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. At your district, in the district. We do want to make note that if you did vote in the past at West Middle, you need now to go to Seward School. That is where your new polling place is. But we urge you to consider the candidates as well as the budget that is before voters. I'm Guy Cosentino for CU Community College and the Citizen. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a great summer, and remember to go vote.